And we are back, 103.9 LI News Radio. This is David Levenstein. And I'm still here out of the box at MacArthur Airport on this beautiful Thursday. I'm very pleased in this hour, and I'm really interested in discussing with Dr. Jesse Stoff. He's an immunologist. And you really focus on treating cancer or caring for patients with cancer?
I care for patients with cancer. The focus of my practice is to help rebuild their immune system,
right,
so their immune system can do what it does best, and that is to help the body to heal.
Well, I will tell you from personal experience that I had a daughter that was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma when she was 17 years old.
Ouch.
And she's in remission now. She's doing great. But during chemo treatment, she became neutropenic, so her immune system was basically non-existent. And then after every chemo treatment, her immune system had to rebuild.
Right.
And then at the end of her chemo treatment and radiation, now she's in remission. She recently had to get all her inoculations that I received when I was a child, that she received when she was a child, because her immune system has to be redeveloped again.
Yeah, reset itself.
Reset itself, right. It's interesting to me because it's as though her immune system is reborn again.
Right. And you know, it's really important, just as a personal side here, if you will, that when somebody is in remission, the key to staying there, prolonging that remission, depends upon the strength of the immune system.
Right.
And there's some basic immune function tests that one can get, and she should have, to see where she stands in terms of the strength of her immune system, to get a rough idea of what her risk might be.
Now, Hodgkin's lymphoma specifically, which is common, but also treatable.
Very. Nowadays, very treatable.
Chemotherapy was created for Hodgkin's lymphoma specifically, right?
Yeah, it was came out of the use of mustard gas in
World War I. Right. But specifically for lymphoma and then leukemia. But what I learned, which I didn't know that, was where leukemia is a cancer of the red blood cells, lymphoma is a cancer of the white blood cells, which is your immune system.
Which is definitely your immune system, but leukemia hits the white blood cells as well. I mean, it can wipe out the red blood cell lines of production, but it definitely hits the white blood cells too. Yeah.
So then how is it that when people are going through chemo or afterward, what would you do for them to help them maintain remission?
Well, what we do is we do some very sophisticated blood tests looking at the structure and function of their immune system. And then that tells me where the problems are that, number one, allow them to get the disease to begin with.
Right.
And number two, that may not be giving them optimal protection to help to prevent a recurrence of that or some other cancer.
Is there a way for you to determine, or through your science, to determine the cause of a cancer like a lymphoma? Because when I asked the doctors over at Sloan Kettering, they're like, no.
Yeah, generally not.
Yeah.
I mean, there are cases.
Just the look at the straw.
Yeah, well, but there are cases of, for instance, there was going back a few years, there was a case out in Nevada of contaminated groundwater from arsenic, where they had then a whole slew of pediatric cancers, certain kinds, a very specific type of leukemia related to this arsenic toxicity. So there are some isolated cases like that where you can trace it back to a cause, but 99% of the time, no.
How about breast cancer? They say Long Island has
a cancer cluster, right?
It is a cluster. Now, is that environmental? Is that in our water? Is that just also the luck of the draw?
Well, you know, I tell you, I met with some of the people over in Nassau County who are responsible for the quality of the water.
Right.
And just to do a little research myself. And, you know, I went through some of the reports with them and looked at their analyses, which were excellent, all third-party analysis. And it's very clear that the water is very clean over there.
Okay.
Because they keep track of things like the Bethpage plume, you know, some of the toxins that were dumped into the aquifer from the aerospace industry decades ago.
Right.
So they keep track of this stuff, and they're very careful to filter the water. But, you know, if anything, if you look at what went on in New Jersey with the lead contamination in the water there, they trace it back to the old pipes. Okay, and that's a big deal. What comes
the old
out,
pipes, lead?
The solder joints.
Okay.
In the copper pipes. You know, when water is sitting overnight.
The solder joints are lead.
Lead.
Right.
Yeah, solder is lead. So when the water is sitting in pipes overnight, it can start to pick up some of these heavy metals out of the metal pipes.
Right.
And that was the case over in New Jersey, and has been the case in many places.
And that's toxic to us.
Very toxic.
But over what period of time does it become toxic to us?
A lifetime. But it's toxic on the level of the immune system. It's an immune suppressant.
Okay.
That's the issue. And when you're trying to, prevent and deal with some of these more severe and chronic diseases, you want to minimize your toxin exposure from the environment and from our food, from our water, etc. There's not much you can do about the air. You can only hold your breath so long. But, but there is everything else you can do to make sure you're drinking good quality water and eating food that's as organic as possible.
I'm talking with Dr. Stoff. He's from the Stoff Lynchets Medical Wellness, right? Mm-hmm. And their phone number is 516-759-4200. 516-759-4200. Their website is Lynchets Medical Wellness. Let me spell that for you. It's LINCHITZ Medical Wellness. Again, that's LINCHITZ Medical Wellness. They can just Google you, really. and I mean, it'll if you just Google Jesse Stoff, it'll take you right there.
Right.
I mean, you've written many books, and there are many articles written by you and penned by you talking about the immune system.
That's right.
There are a lot of autoimmune diseases. One of them, also, remember my family has, is MS.
Hey.
Another autoimmune disease.
Right.
And it's not, is it a coincidence that she also ended up becoming diabetic? Because it's also an autoimmune disease.
Right. In many cases, it is.
Right.
Well, you see, the thing that those two diseases have in common is it has to do with the unusual pathway that they use to become an autoimmune disease. Mm-hmm. There are two major pathways in the immune system that we know of that monitors and balance each other and help to prevent diseases like that. It's
right.
Th1, Th2 pathways. And most autoimmune diseases, when you think about thyroiditis, pancreatitis, I mean, on and on, scleroderma, lupus, etc., are all Th2 diseases.
Okay.
However, MS and diabetes are Th1 diseases.
Yeah, but are these things that you have like a predetermination, like the BRCA gene has? Like can someone take a test and determine whether you're going to have Huntington's disease or you're a strong candidate for breast cancer, for example?
Well, with the autoimmune diseases, most of the time there's a trigger, either a toxin or a virus that's known to trigger various autoimmune diseases. So, for example, when you're dealing with thyroiditis, and there's a lot of thyroiditis on Long Island, right? There is a bacteria called Yersinia enterocolitica.
What would be the symptoms of a thyroiditis before you go in? Is that like hyperactive thyroid?
It's hypoactive thyroid.
Hypoactive,
right.
Okay.
So the person is going to be more fatigued. They may have hair loss. They have easy weight gain. Things of that sort of thing.
What does that have to do with Long Island?
They don't know.
But again,
Long Island is a cluster of thyroiditis cases. And interestingly enough, take it the next step.
Yeah.
If you look at the literature, there's actually a connection between thyroid disease and the risk of breast cancer.
I want to talk about, people talk about early detection, okay? And then there's something people can talk about as early prevention.
That's right.
So how can we take care of ourselves? How can we rid ourselves from these toxins that seem to be poisoning us, from the air we breathe to the water we drink?
Right.
So how can we cleanse ourselves of these toxins so we can at least reduce the risk of certain cancers or developing some autoimmune disease?
Well, I recommend to my patients that they have good quality water to start with. So that means either filtered water with a good multi-stage filter or bottled water that comes in glass bottles.
Because you're an immunologist, will people see you for that reason, what I just said, for prevention?
Yes.
To make sure, I don't want to...
Not a lot of patients, though. Right. I mean, it's pretty rare when somebody comes in all gung-ho asking what they could do to help prevent the problem.
Well, right. If they have a family history...
Yeah, those people are more motivated.
They're the ones that should come in and say, hey, listen, I have an aunt that has MS. I got an uncle, and both my parents are diabetes. I want to avoid, or at least reduce the risk of the possibility that I might follow in their footsteps.
Right. And nowadays there are blood tests you can do to assess that risk.
Right, okay.
And then when you look at the blood test and you can see where the problems are, then you can do things to mitigate it, greatly reducing the person's risk of developing future diseases.
How did you get into this science? What drove you here? You had a traditional medical training through med school.
Right.
You said you were in family practice.
Right.
How did you incorporate? Was this an incorporation into your family practice, or was this a transition?
Okay, so when I was a kid, our family doctor was a homeopathic physician.
Okay.
He was a natural medicine physician.
Right.
So when I was growing up, that's what I took to be practicing medicine.
Right.
And then I got a little older, got into high school. He took me to some medical conferences with him. They were homeopathic medical conferences.
Right.
So I began to study, and I was fascinated by it. And
why? What fascinated you to homeopathic medicine versus traditional medicine?
Well, at that point, I didn't know very much about traditional medicine. I was fascinated by how one can use natural substances from nature to help heal people's illnesses. And it was just fascinating to me how these things worked, since the biochemical basis of homeopathy is still not known.
Right.
So it's interesting how, to me, how such a thing could work, but nonetheless it does.